Said, how come you come up with 500 SCM? I agree your points you mentioned, but I don't understand this one. Let's go to school. So let's say, so here is arrow number 1, and see here is arrow number 2. Okay. So.
BD arrow.
Okay, so arrow number 1 is the red line. Arrow number 2 is the blue line, right? So in master modes, we have, if we look at this, shapes like this, we have what this represents is the space or standard control mode distance of movement. Okay, so what this says is I can move relative to my speed here within 220 meters per second. Okay, just like this arrow here is going to move relative to his deflection angle with 220. Okay, does everyone follow me here? If I lose you here, guys, just let me know. I know it can be a little technical, but I just want, and obviously the circles aren't exactly, I mean, you're gonna have to forgive me for my shitty paint skills, right? So we also have in master modes, which represents, I guess that the circle would be more, yeah, I guess it would be more this way. So the inverted egg. So, all right, so what this represents, now stay with me here. Yes, Nebel's right, afterburn. So the space that I can move, okay, is this. Now, here's what I'm saying, right? And this is based on my experience, and I got some videos I can show you to kind of illustrate this point. If we want better geometry, let's say arrow number 1 here, cross his paths with arrow number 2 and starts a 1 circle fight. Okay, this arrow number here crosses paths and starts the 1 circle fight. Okay, so what happens is this arrow starts going like this arrow starts going like this, and because of the zone space that we have, if we go here, sorry, shapes, because of the space that we have, this arrow has this much room to move, this arrow has that much room to move. Okay, because we only have so much speed, by the time that you make the decision to take that fight, because the speeds are so low, so as you come in, because at this point in the fight you've made the decision to enter the fight. Okay, now because you're only closing at 400 meters per second, because I'm going 200, he's going 200, we've made the decision to play. If I decide to just push through, by the time you get here, okay, my nose is still facing the enemy. You're gonna cross my path and go here. I'm just gonna loop around and I'm gonna be within gun range. I'm gonna be within gun range because my circle of engagement based on my weapon velocity is always gonna be there. Okay, so there's no need for me to lead turn or do any of that stuff, which is a really fundamental thing, part of piloting. Okay, if we have higher speeds, okay, now again, we'll talk about the afterburner thing in a second, but I'll tell you how that geometry and afterburner changes once you start bringing the speeds up, because it forces it into a funnel, and that funnel is not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like, in order for you to extrapolate in real time an imaginary funnel, basically, that's not consistent in open space, your brain just really struggles with kind of calculating that there's a funnel instead of a sphere, because in space you move in a direction, like you should just move in that direction, right? So if we have our higher speeds, then the point at which you have to make the decision to turn or lead turn, right? Because like, let's say he starts, you know, piling in here, he wants to engage you, he starts flying this way, but because you've made the decision at, like, let's say 2 kilometers, right? 2 km. It could be anything depending on, it's all relative, right? So that could be 1 kilometer per se, right? But the point is, you have, before you get within gun range, you have to decide to make that lead turn. And as you make that lead turn, because you've turned your nose, again, right? Because you've turned your nose 90 or 60 degrees off center. So your guns are facing this way, but your nose now is, you know, your eyeballs are facing towards the target, but your nose is facing this way, right? Because as he passes you, he might get like a little bit of damage, but he's got less than like a half a second of target time. He blows right past you. He's now here facing this way, and you're here behind him, and now it turns into a tail. And when I say a tail fight, like it's exactly how you'd expect in something like World War II, where because now I have a position on you, because my position is this, and his position is this, right? He's passed through that turn. I've made the decision to lead turn already because I make that decision here. Because if we don't make that decision, if I decide to stay guns on, right? Then he's going to pass through me. It's going to result in a joust. You're going to get outside of gun range and you're going to have to come back around, right? This is like a fundamental piloting skill, right? Because his lead pip's telling him to shoot here. You've now moved in and you're within gun range of 800 or whatever meters, right? Now, if we don't have those kinds of speeds, what ends up happening is you end up getting into infinite trade fights where you're always guns on because there's no like zero.
Sorry,
yeah, fire away.
Can you draw the arrows in blue and red? Because it's a bit difficult to follow.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Now, if we don't have the speeds to make these kinds of fights, then what ends up happening is I end up sliding in, you end up sliding in, because at no point, if I decide to start passing through you, you can just immediately turn around and you're already within gun range, right? That is a problem because if that's always the case, then you never have any control over the velocity in the vector of the fight. Now you're locked into, if this ship is an interceptor, right? Then I have more speed. And it's what I've told CIG before, like, look, why is the Buccaneer and the Merlin doing so well in master modes and the Gladius and the Hornet are doing really poorly? Does anybody know why the Buccaneer and the Archimedes / Merlin are doing really well and the Gladiuses, the Hornets, the Vanguards are basically just food for the Buccaneers and the other interceptors? Does anybody know why that's the case? Speed, right? Because they are the only ship relative to all the other ships that can decide to get into this fight and leave. So that little arrow or Gladius or whatever is now stuck trying to engage a target that if it doesn't want to fight, it's going to leave that fight. It's going to reset. It's going to find its second Buccaneer or it's going to find its second fight. Because again, if you're slowing, you know, speed is life in dogfights, it's going to find its second guy and both of them are going to engage this little guy here. Now, this lends itself to team tactics. Master Modes forces team tactics to happen because the reality is if an interceptor wants to take a single 1v1 duel with another fighter, so if this is a light fighter and this is a interceptor, that interceptor has a lower turn rate, which means the distance that it can engage from is higher because its turn rate is limited, which means I can engage from a closer distance. So I can be here on him. And if I'm underneath this zone here, because if that represents basically his maximum turn rate, then his guns might be here, but I'm always going to be a bit of ahead of that because I'm underneath his turn rate. The problem is, because we have the afterburner mechanic, if I get myself into that situation, if I go here, and we're going to talk about the afterburner stuff here. If I get myself into that situation, here's arrow number 1. Here's arrow number 2. I'm an interceptor. This guy's a light fighter, right? I'm not going to take that turn fight. If I get into a sticky spot, I'm going to leave because this is my zone of movement when I'm in SCM, and this is my zone of movement when I'm in quote-unquote boost speed, right? Because this little light fighter now has to turn himself, because again, it's relative. Here's his SCM speed. Here's his egg circle. Okay? those are 90-degree angles. It's not a circle, which means I can always, because I get, I turn my nose around, I have to face this direction before I have the speed to catch his egg. And also, don't forget, light fighters have a smaller egg, so it doesn't matter, because by the time you turn around, I'm already here, which means I'm outside of your gun zone. Even with the speeds at 2000, I might take a little bit of chip damage, but again, understand the difference between cone fire and effective fire. So if you have effective fire, in the sense that if you're close enough, like within 300 meters, you're getting 90% of your damage. But because if I'm out here, oh, sorry, blue. If I'm out here, right, and my cone fire is this, then I'm only representing this percentage of this entire circle. So that's only about, let's say, 20% of damage compared to if my ship was here, right? Which means the beating zone of the guns encompasses the entire ship, so I'm getting 90%, right? So my effective range is 250 meters, but my damage range is like 1200 or 1500 or whatever you want to do, right? They've decided to classify ships into roles. And in aerial combat, the dominant role is speed is life, because speed allows to engage and disengage. So unless they give us essentially hit scan weapons, which take the whole calculation of gunnery out the table, which they've almost done already with the ridiculously high speeds of the guns, then the ships that are going to be able to manage the fight are going to win those fights. And those are going to be interceptors. So the entire role of lights and mediums and heavies is an absolute joke, because mechanically they can't even hold a candle. Because even if you have a Vanguard, so let's say you have a Vanguard, right? And the Vanguard, here's your big chunky Vanguard with your big wings. Ugh. You've got a huge E-penis. Look at you. You've got this massive, there's your cockpit and your turret gunner, right? You've got that Vanguard, and you think you're the coolest thing ever, right? Anything gets in front of you, you have this. I have 4,500 DPS, and I just fill this entire space with and anything gets inside, anything, even 20% of 4,500 DPS, we're looking at like 1,000 DPS, which is more than enough to kill this puny little virgin light fighter sitting here being like, oh, I used to be a super Chad and now there's nothing I can do. Family friendly, right? So, but the problem is, any good pilot, any smart pilot, any pilot who is actually going to train and learn how to do this, you're not going to be put in that position. Because if that happens, and again, I'm not going to be using a light fighter, because why aren't we using light fighters, guys? Why am I not using a light fighter when I can be using an interceptor? Because that interceptor, when you're doing this, interceptor number 2 is going, lol, I'm going to now engage you. Pew, pew, pew. And he's going to fly in from the side here, and he's going to engage. Right? Yogi said himself, MasterModes has basically killed the duel. And there's a reason why the dueling, and we'll talk about that in a second, of why the dueling is so bad. Because MasterModes is forcing team play, because they're classifying ships in such a gargantuously horrendous way that I have no choice. If I want to kill this Vanguard, I have to 2v1 it. But in a gang setting, 2v1s are going to be the only way to effectively kill stuff. Which, in a certain sense, is kind of like modern dogfighting, where you never engage something by yourself, but it's a lot of missile play, but we'll get into that later. Right? My problem is, these Vanguards now have no role. And the stats that they're getting from their feedback, from all that stuff, well, guess what those Vanguards are doing? They're killing people that aren't trained. They're killing people that aren't really understanding how to fly their ships. They're just, they're getting Timmy John, who's in a Gladius for the first time, and he gets in front of a Vanguard, and the Vanguard just goes, lol. And with the fixed assist, like, it's basically, this much of the zone is basically aiming for you. Like, it's, let's say you aim here, but the target's here. The fixed assist is going to nudge you into that right spot, it's a pretty egregious like aim assist. You can see it. Like when you fire at something, you can see the bullets like bending through space. And on top of that, because they have cone fire, like you're just moving that cone. So like even if it's incorrect, which the pip system always will be, like you're still going to apply a crazy amount of damage. So the reason these vanguards are doing well is because like they're shooting people that aren't trained to fly. So they're just going to get smoked. So they're getting incorrect stats from these heavy fighters. And the same thing goes for mediums. Like the meta will be when it comes out in master modes is interceptors will be the only viable choice for PvP. Because anything else but interceptors will not be able to manage the fight. End of story. And I mean, for God's sake, you've got Buccaneers that have the same weapon loadout as the Hornet. Like it's got 5 size 3 and size 2 guns. Right? So let's go to the next. It says, but okay, but how is SCM Speed 500 fixing this problem? Here's the thing. If you increase the zone, here's your Vanguard, okay? Here's your Vanguard. Here's your hostile ship. Okay? Let's say this is our Interceptor. This little guy here. And this is Mr. Vanguard here. I am not going to be able to stop this guy from getting up on top of me and rotating me. And then when I want to leave, you know, because I want to leave, he's going to just follow in behind me and keep on forcing the fight. Okay? There is nothing I can do about that because my movement space is so slow that I can only make a separation this big depending on my SCM speed. Now I can boost afterburner that zone up a little bit, but guess what? The boost afterburner zone on Interceptor is twice that size. So we're back to the same problem. It hasn't changed from live, from all this other stuff, right? The problem is I can no longer create separation because I don't have the velocity or momentum in some of these turns to actually do it. Because having lower speeds leads to lower distance separation.
We would be honored.
Unless they jack the turn rate on the Vanguard like crazy. Again, all relative, right? So if they jack the turn rates, then I don't need as much separation to get guns on again. But they want to design Vanguards around low turn rates, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you're in a small ship or in any ship that's smaller than a Vanguard, you can just get up on it and out-turn it. I mean, there's nothing you can do. And you think that little turret's going to do much damage? It's not, right? I'm not going to keep drawing the Vanguard with the EP, okay? Now, if I have higher speeds, okay, and I see this Interceptor coming in, I see him going like this, he's eyeballing me, I'm like, okay, I know this guy's coming in. At this point during the fight, okay, let's say, given a distance here, let's say that distance is 3 kilometers, okay? And he's closing on me with a delta of 700 meters per second, okay? Because we've set our speeds higher. So the delta, the accelerational difference between two ships is going to be higher. When I decide, okay, am I going to get into a turn fight with this guy or am I going to force an extension and punish him, right? If I force that extension, at this point here, I decide, you know what? I'm going to hyper accelerate here. Okay, I'm going to push really hard here. I'm going to jack that to 850, right? Meters per second. Let's say I increase the delta. That Buccaneer is going to do 2 things. One, he's going to lead turn here to try and merge with me, right? And if he does that, then I look at his nose direction, which is going this way, and I pull against it, and I pull down here, and I start forcing. Because what I want to do is I want to create this right here. As he comes around, he thinks he's being smart because he's gonna, you know, intercept my movement here. And I see that because I'm coming up, I'm hyper accelerating. I see that here, and I then push into it because his movement is coming up this way, and I push down. I start going here. I start turning around. Eventually, I'm facing back towards my enemy. And by the time he realizes that and comes around, I'm within the distance I need to engage. right? At this point, I can decide to push through again, because whether you like it or not, if I have a lower turn rate, I cannot win turn fights. Like you physically cannot get the guns on target. So you have to create these extensions in order, because as he comes back in, you're going to try and get punishment. Because as he's S-turning his way onto the target, you're filling this entire space here with bullets. But unless we have higher speeds, I cannot create that deflection. I cannot separate from my target. It's what I've always been trying to tell CIG. It's like, if you want to design heavy fighters, give them high speeds, low acceleration, low turn rate, which means during a fight of negotiating position like this, I, in the Vanguard, have some kind of option to keep the fight high energy, because now the smaller ship that wants to engage me now has to try to bring themselves up to that speed and energy to engage, and we can fight. If you don't create that extension with lower turn rate, you just get smoked. It's just that simple. So the turret with new aim assist and gimbal weapons should kill any small fighter who comes alone, maybe. Okay, but now we're not talking about flying anymore, though, Nebel. So now we're talking about this. So we're not talking about flight anymore. So now we're talking about balls in space and damage application. So now we're talking about, and this kind of gets back to the whole point. Now we're talking about, where's my paintbrush here? So now we're talking about, this is your ship, and this is the zone that which you can engage on. Turn rate doesn't matter, because your little turret here with guns on it can spin at infinite ranges, and you're going to engage something else which also has a gimbal zone. It's going to have little turrets here, and as soon as your little balls in space get close enough so that the velocity of the projectiles that they're firing are no longer avoidable by the deflection that you're making, you get into Eve 2.0, where you're both within range. You're both exchanging fire. And now it becomes, I do 1200 DPS. I do 1400 because I have the upgraded weapons, which means I'm going to kill you in 2.9 seconds, and you're going to kill me in 3.6 seconds. Said no, 2 Vanguards versus each other. Well, that's what I just showed. 2 Vanguards versus each other. There's no we don't have enough speed to get an angle. So if we're 2 Vanguards, right? So this is Vanguard number 1. This is Vanguard number 2. It's just like I was saying before. I close to within distance, okay? But because I'm only going 200 meters per second, he's only going 200 meters per second. Even our boost power, we're only still going 400, like whatever. You know, as soon as I again, because our weapons are so much faster too, I can engage where I used to be able to engage at 800, you know, and now I can engage at 1200. And if I'm fighting a Vanguard, it's so much bigger. I can probably engage at 1400, right? Which means I now have to have the speed that corresponds to that speed of weapon. If you increase the weapon velocity and you decrease the speed of the ship, you take the flight equation out of the problem, because no matter what I do to move myself in here, you're just going to aim onto where I am and fill those spots full of bullets, because by the time I move into this spot and I move into that spot, the bullet's just going to get there so much faster than my ship is able to move out of the way. If that makes any sense. That is capital ship warfare. If you have two, let's say you have carrier number 1 and carrier number 2, you know, so you say, like, we have a Javelin and an Idris, right? It's going to be the identical thing. The Idris is going to be OP as shit, because the Idris can sit at double the distance with those railguns and just plink away at the Vanguard or the Javelins or bigger ships. So it's going to be an interesting balance how they do it there, unless they make the guns. But again, right? You know, at that point but again, that's capital ship warfare, because then you go into like, okay, this shield face is here, this shield face is here, but all of a sudden I get flanked by a Perseus, and now you're taking damage with a shield face that has less power. You know, you take out your engines here, you've got turrets here, so there's a different kind of fight going on here. Now it's a question of, okay, I'm going to take out the weapons on him to take him out of the fight, and then I'm going to spin my ship around and start engaging the smaller capital ship and hopefully take out its shield generator or kill it before this ship has a chance to get its weapon systems back online. That's a different kind of game. That's capital ship warfare, which I'm all for, because there's no flying capital ships in the sense, right? So, does that kind of clear it up a little bit more? Or are you still confused? Because if you're still confused, guys, it's my fault for not explaining it better. I will gladly spend more time to explain it, right? Said all the other changes I agree, just not the high-speed combat. Like in terms, so which changes are we talking about? Also, Nebel, we're already at 600, 500 meters per second with Afterburner. So, like, we're not actually increasing speeds of combat. We're just keeping speeds. We're just keeping speeds a little higher so that you can actually fly instead of stay. Like, you're basically right now, it's like a toggle. You're like sitting at low speed, and then you engage somebody, and all of a sudden the fight gets really fast until somebody's at a boost, and then you switch into nav mode and run away. Because if you're fighting without boost, like, you're just dead, right? So, but the problem is that combat area grows exponentially with speed. So if I double the movement speed, I quadruple the combat area. Wrong, because afterburner speeds are still at that spot. So, like, the fights are. You know what they should do is increase SCM speeds to 400 and only increase afterburner speeds to 150 over whatever ship's native SCM is. So, but the problem is if you double the movement speed, quadruple the combat area, then we have the same problem now. We end up with distances of 3 to 4 kilometers instead of 1 kilometer to 250. Are you talking about individual dogfights? Like, I'm confused, Nebel. And also, there's nothing wrong with having a larger battle space. Like, you've got missile systems, which would add a reason to use missile systems because you'd force people, without movement. So, like, either they reduce the weapon velocities a lot, because again, it's all based on ratios. If I'm going 1,000 meters per second, right, and I'm engaging with 2,000 meter per second guns, it's as if I'm going 500 meters per second engaging with 1,000 meter per second guns. The deflection angle to engage this guy versus this guy, his pip is going to be 2 ship lengths off the target at 2 kilometers. But at half that, I can be at 1 kilometer and engage the target. And the deflection angle will be 2 ship lengths off the target because my weapon velocity corresponds to my speed. Okay? These guys are closer than these guys. But these guys have the same deflection angle. They just have more range. So do master modes at least give interesting team play? Well, the team play hasn't changed. So that's the thing too, you guys got to understand. Team play in StarCitizen's live model is the same as it is in master modes. You still have to 2v1 a guy. You still have to string him out. You still have to take pressure from somebody and engage somebody out. That nothing has changed there. If you watch my YouTube video on the Buccaneers and the Merlins, it's exactly the same as if you were to watch my videos where I'm flying with Grand Phenom in the Hornet and we're fighting 15 versus 2 and all that stuff. That's exactly the same. The ranges and the speeds are different, right? It, like, to the untrained eye, you're like, oh, it looks a bit different, but what's actually going on is the same thing. So nothing has changed there, right? So I think they should have 250 SCM speed and give ships small afterburner for 4 to 8 seconds, not long afterburners like we have now. And maybe like Wars Squadrons, which has some awesome dogfights with very low speeds. Okay, so Nebel, I played Wars Squadrons competitively. I actually won a lot of tournaments in that game. I played that game for probably over 1,000 hours in a very, very, very small amount of time. Okay, I know that game. I know everything it is to know about that game. Okay, so Wars Squadrons, though, the reason why the game did so well in terms of its 3D shooter aspect is because it was not 6 degrees of freedom. Okay, And also, you got to understand too, the accelerations in Star Wars Squadrons were basically instant. Like the G's that an A-wing would pull would be into the 1 to 150 G range. Like it was basically instant, right? So you have these insanely high speed ships and also don't forget too, guys, the size of an A-wing has a massive impact on the stuff. So remember, guys, what I showed yesterday? Do you guys remember what I showed yesterday? Yeah, I see he's on an ad break, but do you guys remember what I showed yesterday about the size of stuff? So Nebel, to answer your question about Star Wars Squadrons, I played that game esports professionally for many years, and I won plenty of tournaments. I love that game in and out. I've played that game for literally thousands of hours. Love that game. But the problem is, the reason why Star Wars Squadrons works in more of an arcadey way is because it doesn't do 6 degrees of freedom, right? You have sliding and you can shoot off angle for a little bit, but there's a huge difference. And also, make no mistake, the physical size of a ship lends itself immensely to the ability to hit and not hit, right? So for example, if you're, and I've said this before, right? CIG has made a design flaw of making insanely large vessels and then going, how are we going to fix this? Because if I'm in a Fury, I can be at 1/7 the distance. Like here, let me show you this. So this is your Vanguard, okay? Now, if I'm engaging this Vanguard, okay? I'm engaging that Vanguard at, let's say, oh, I don't know. Let's say he's at 150 meters. Okay. Now, the amount of pixels that I need to trace are this. Okay. So I'm shooting at, let's say, actually, I'll make it easy, 200 pixels. Okay. So, you know, at 150 meters, I have to basically aim within, you know, if I'm sitting in my Hornet, like this is, you know, this is my Hornet, I'm sitting in the Hornet, he's at 150 meters. You know, it doesn't matter whether he, again, and with low speed, he might deflect here, he might deflect here, or he might deflect here. But do any of his deflections matter, guys? If I can only make a deflection angle at 200 meters per second from center to out here, like, do any of these deflection directions make any sense? Like, does anything I do? No, of course, right? And on top of that, if fixed assist and cone fire make the pixels that I actually have to aim at this big, okay, which means I only need to turn my mouse or my joystick within like a 15-degree pixel area. Instead of actually being accurate within that little square, I now have to be accurate to within this. Okay, it's going to be very easy to hit that target. Okay, now watch this. Now, Mr. Vanguard, okay, is at 800 meters. Okay. Now, if I'm shooting at a Fury, what's the distance do you think something like a Fury? So cross-sectionally, okay, if I'm shooting at a Fury, the same pixels that it takes me to hit this guy are the same pixels, the same, let's say 20 pixels, okay, physical size. That Vanguard can be at 800 meters, whereas I'm at 150. So I'm basically 7 times larger than little Fury here. But I'm at 150 meters, which means I'm outrating you, and the Vanguard's at 800, and it's not outrating you at all. Okay? So if this is a problem, which CIG seems to not understand is a huge problem because they've made their ship so insanely large, I'm gonna just shoot at you from distance because I can hit you and you can't hit me. And that's because physics is physics. An object in motion stays in motion. If I fire a projectile, it goes at a certain speed. That means that in order for me to shoot you, okay, and again, if they take away our acceleration, then I can only deflect this far, okay? I can only deflect this much, okay? So even at 800 meters, I'm probably not going to be able to avoid shots that are coming at me with any kind of meaningful effort. But if I came into the turn, okay, if I came into the turn and my deflection angle was out here, because I came into the turn with energy, with speed, say I slid into that turn at like, I don't know, 1100 meters per second, or let's say 500 meters per second, okay, I would exponentially increase that deflection. Okay, and then if I rolled myself into a turn here, it would change the deflection angle even more, right? It would be out here, and you'd be able to turn, like you'd actually be able to deflect against hostile opponents. So, but ships will have no hit points in the future, but armor components. Nebel, it doesn't matter if this guy, so this guy here, let's say he has, because that's a common argument I see a lot. It's like, oh, when armor system comes in. But I'll leave you with this, right? Think about this. Let's say this guy has 10,000. This guy has 10,000 hit points, per se, right? Or he's got level 3 armor, so I need a level 2 gun to penetrate level 3 armor, or whatever, you know. Or I need a level 3 gun to penetrate level 3 armor. Just so happens that the Buccaneer has level 4 guns, you know. So my Buccaneer is going to come in. I'm going to engage you, and by the time you turn around and re-engage, I'm off. See you later, bye-bye. And the second guy is going to come in, engage you. Oh, see ya, bye-bye. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it, right? Like, you can have other vanguards together, and they can try to lock stuff down. Good luck. Good luck. And what's going to happen is they're going to chip this guy down. He's going to go down to 10,000 hit points. Every run, he's going to go down to 5,000. And he's going to go down to 2,000. And then he's going to get killed. And then they're going to move to the next vanguard, and the next vanguard, and the next vanguard, and the next vanguard. And you're going to go one by one, take them off the field. So my turret kills the Buccaneer, I think, but I'm excited to see it in the live server. So your turret kills a solo Buccaneer that doesn't understand what he's doing, Nebel. But if you go up against any kind of reasonably trained fighter group, like you'll die. Because no smart person is going to fight a Vanguard by themselves, especially with a turret. I mean, and that's the same way it is in live. If you fight a Hurricane in live and you're a solo Arrow or a Gladius, the chance of you winning that fight is basically none, right? That's not a fight that you take. But as soon as you get 2 guys in the air, and again, I've said this before, you know, the whole, you know, 2 is 1, 1 is none, you know, like we haven't solved any of the problems. Heavy fighters are still going to get mobbed and ganked. Interceptors are still going to be the most meta ships in the game, because where the light fighter was the most meta in live, the interceptors are in the exact same spot. So you're not solving the problem. The highest acceleration, highest speed ships are going to negotiate the fights and win. That isn't changing with master modes. What they've done is they've gamified and arcadified the system to the point where you just require less flight skill to execute on the same stuff, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it feels so much worse because it's so much more arcadey. Like, and the thing is too, you now have less options in that bigger ship. Where you kind of had some options with the higher speeds, you could actually range control a little bit, you could get into distance, you know, like you could actually bait them into a turn. You know, you could hold your fire until you're within range and then hit them really hard. Like, to say that heavy fighters weren't doing well in live is just simply not true. You just had to be a good pilot. So, you know, it's all based on ratios. It's all based on, you know, and here's the thing too, like rookies and new players are going to get absolutely eviscerated. Like, they're going to get absolutely destroyed because now there's no chance for them to win the multi-game. Like, as soon as 2 experienced pilots lock onto you, that's it. Like, there is nothing that you can do. You can't buy time. You can't pull them aside. You can't string them out. You can't wait for backup. You are 100,000% going to get ganked and destroyed instantly as soon as you get targeted, right? Because the weapon speeds are so high and the ships are so slow. It's going to be like EVE Online, where it's like, fleet fights aren't going to have any flight components to them. They're just going to be like, target this guy primary, next guy primary, next guy. And as soon as one of the interceptors takes pressure, The Interceptor goes, okay, I'm out. See you guys. Pff, off he goes, flies away. Then the enemy team primary is another Interceptor. Okay, see you guys later. Off he goes, flies away, comes back around, re-engages. Because the only ships that are going to be of value, of flight value, are going to be the Interceptors because they're the ones with the speeds to negotiate. And my argument is like, let's bring the speeds up so ships can negotiate again. That we have the space to take these lead turns. We have the space to create extensions so that bigger vessels like Vanguards have enough time to actually get their guns on target to engage. So that, like, and that's the thing is too, is like, I'm trying to explain to people that I think strongly that, like, the way Master Modes is tuned, and you got to understand, the tuning of Master Modes is what I'm arguing for. It's not the removal of Master Modes. It's all the exact same problems. It's just been offset to button presses, and light fighter meta is now Interceptor meta. So you're going to see Buccaneers everywhere and Merlins and stuff like that everywhere, because those are the only ships that are going to work, because they're going to be able to engage multiple ships. Anyway, I hope that was a little bit more enlightening. You know, said, yes, as I walk through my Valley of Shadow to you guys. Said, with high combat speeds, awesome pilots can kill 5 to 10 enemy pilots because they can separate them. In Master Modes, I think that's impossible. Maybe 2, maybe 3, not so much. Again, not true. You know, like the solo pilot will not be as effective. That I agree with, because they've taken away all the negotiation ability for a solo pilot. But make no mistake, you get a couple experienced guys, like Avenger Squadron guys, like you get 3 guys in Avenger Squadron and in Buccaneers, they're going to eviscerate 20 guys. I guarantee it. The only limiting factor there is going to be guys running out of ammo. So again, problem not fixed. But again, what we've lost is the problem's not been fixed. And what we've lost is we've lost the smoothness of flight combat. Now the combat is very jagged. It's very, I'm at low speed or I'm at high speed. I'm at low speed or I'm at high speed. There's no transition of movement. There's no smoothness in flight. There's no looking at the flight path and going, how am I going to approach that turn? Now it's like I get within range and he's boosting and I want to chase him, but I can't because I'm not an interceptor. GG, have a good night. That's what it's going to turn into. I mean, mark my words. I mean, this has all been tested. I've been doing Master Modes for so many hours. I mean, mechanically, this is what's going to happen. It's not about, you know, like, oh, this ship needs slightly higher turn rate, that the Gladius needs more DPS. It doesn't matter. The Gladius is not going to get guns on because nobody is going to take a turn fight with an Interceptor because they're just going to leave the fight. You know? So... You know, and again, this whole, oh, but the multi-crew ships are doing better. No, they're not. The multi-crew ships are not doing better. The multi-crew ships are doing good at shooting rookies. That's what they're doing. But multi-crew ships are just in the exact same spot they were before, right? They've just pushed the problem a little further away. Now you have to kite at longer range. So you've just pushed the problem. You just offset the same problem. Instead of happening at 1400 meters, now it happens at 2000 meters. So it's the same problem. It's you know, and a hammerhead, if fighters don't want to engage the hammerhead, they just don't engage the hammerhead. They wait until there's a ship on the grid that's designed to kill the hammerhead, and then they fly in together and they kill the hammerhead. You know? Yeah, but Marky, you fly the Buccaneer, you're smoking people too, right? And and again, Marky, it depends on who you're shooting, right? Yeah, the Buck's overpowered. I mean, Marky, you're an Avenger Squadron pilot. If you had 5 AVS guys in Buccaneers and 5 AVS guys in Gladiuses, what do you think is going to happen? Said, just like Eve, where interceptors are dampeners. Said, e.g., bring up SCM to 350, boost to 150 to 500. We just need higher SCM speeds in general. Otherwise, and here's the thing too. Let me ask you this. If you're flying just in SCM speed, Neville, if you're just in SCM speed, is your ship competitive if you'd never used any boost at all? So in my opinion, 250 is great. That's 900 kilometers an hour. That's really fast. But again, so let me explain this. Again, it's all based on ratios. If you're really hard, like if your heart is really set on 250, okay, then what we need is we need velocities of weapons that correspond to the speeds of the ship, right? So we had, here, go me here. Let's do a little quick little math here. So we had 1100 meters per second for most light fighters. It was like 12, whatever. Let's say 1200, just to make the math easy. 1200 meters per second was for most light fighters, or most fighters. Like a Hornet was 1200, heavies are 1200, you know. Again, armor is only going to change the time to kill Nebel. It's not going to change the mechanics of how ships engage. It doesn't matter how many hit points you have, because it's just going to take me slightly longer to kill you. And it just means that the ships I have to bring to the fight have to have the weapon systems capable to punch through the armor. So armor is just going to be a stopgap to say that no, you know, these fighters are not allowed to kill a hammerhead. Like light fighters are basically, lights, mediums, and whatever, they're just not allowed to apply damage because of the quote unquote armor to the hammerhead. But that's fine. Fighters aren't really designed to kill hammerheads anyway, and that's not what I'm arguing for. I'm not arguing for a future where light fighters and medium fighters are the only viable choice. I've never argued for that. I don't know where people got that idea. I don't know why people are talking about that on Reddit and Spectrum. It's not true. It's fake news. It's bullshit. I want a future where ships do have roles, but that the flight component of how the ships interact with each other is there for us to have the space to have these kinds of fights. So we had 1400 meter per second guns with 1200 meter per second speeds. So if you had 250 meter per second guns, okay, you would have 300 meter per second speeds. That's the same ratio for speed to weapon compared to live, compared to master modes. Now, I'm not saying we go to 300 meters per second weapon velocity. That's hilariously low, right? Because afterburner speeds bring us up to 500, okay? Which means we need at the very minimum 700 meter per second speeds. But again, the fights are jagged. They either at low energy are staying here, or they're at high energy fighting like this. So you're at low energy staying here, or you're at high energy doing stuff. And you're basically flying around making all these aerial combat maneuvers at high speed. And as soon as you're out of boost, you're like, uh-oh, nav mode, off I go. And what I'm arguing for is the native movement of a ship should be this, and the boosted speeds should be this. That little zone that we have here, okay, is for forward momentum, for when somebody is running away and I fucked up my power management, then I'm going to be able to close that extra 150 until I can get within weapon range again and re-engage. But unless we have SCM speeds where most of the fighting is going to be taking place, if we don't have enough room to do these maneuvers, then we're fighting in tiny little ponds like this, and these little bubbles are basically bumping up on each other like that. And it's so silly. Like, it's just hilariously silly. The disparity between boosted speeds and SCM speeds is way too high. It's way, way too high. You know? Like, in a certain kind of funny way, I'm arguing to bring speeds lower. I'm saying bring us SCM to 500 and bring our boosted speeds just slightly higher than that. And the reason I'm talking about why 500 feels good is because in live, if you fight in atmosphere, most of the time you're fighting at the highest end at 500 if you're flying flat, which means most of the time you're turning and engaging at around the 350 meter mark or slower. In atmosphere, in live now, and it's the best feeling combat StarCitizen has ever had. If you fly ships that are good in atmosphere on the live build of the game right now, it's awesome. You can actually engage stuff. The weapon speeds make sense for how small and how fast the ships move. So the ratio of weapon velocity, acceleration, speeds, and weapons in live and atmosphere is something that master modes can simulate, because it feels good, it looks good, it works good, it's better for the game. Because unless we have speeds that make sense, unless we can have the space of movement to do these kinds of movements, then you don't need to worry about lead turning, which is a huge part about, you know, combat. Then you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. Because once you accelerate on boost and then you let go of the boost button, this weird thing happens where the ship starts to decelerate, you lose a lot of control, and it's like you're sliding with less control. It feels terrible. It just feels terrible. And to me, like, it doesn't feel like you're flying a space game anymore. Like if you want atmospheric flight, go into atmosphere, right? We're going to have control surfaces. It's going to make sense. You know, it just, you know, it's a shame that it's going to take, I'd say the general community, you know, a little bit of time to kind of come around to the realizing like, oh, damn, you know, and I'll show you guys, like when Master Modes comes out to the PU, I'll show you guys AVS running around in a gang of interceptors and killing multi-crew ships, killing Connies, taking no damage, killing all the other fighters, still going 10v1 or 10v2 or whatever, because it hasn't solved any of the problems. You know, and look, I'm all for a deep, you know, I'm all for winning. I mean, I love winning, but it's just the smoothness of combat has to, you know, has to be there. Again, it's all based on ratios, right? So the ratio between how fast ships are and the ratio between how much they accelerate, like that's all, again, you can take live and you can say, take my weapon velocity, drop it, right? Take your things, drop that stuff. Yeah, I know you got to go, Neville. It's all good. Thanks for coming by, but I hope that I was able to explain some more stuff about this. Maybe you have a better understanding about it, right? And I don't know what people have been barking about and saying this and that, but you know, it's like, I'm a big believer in like, if you've got something, come to the person and ask, you know what I mean? It's just, I'm an open book. If you have questions, I'm here. I will spend as much time as you want explaining concepts from my point of view so people can better understand it. And if people are telling you like, oh, A1's talking trash and that, just come to the stream and ask yourself, right? I have a certain point of view on stuff and it is what it is.